Let's put this 5G comparison into perspective. £179 versus £1,149 UK prices including VAT. The Samsung Galaxy S21 Ultra is 6.5 times more expensive than this Xiaomi newcomer, the Redmi Note 9T. But wait, what I'm not doing is saying that everyone should go and buy the cheaper phone because of this. They're both good and full dual 5G smartphones in their own way, and I can recommend both to different people, of which more later. It's just instructive to be aware of what you get at each end of the recommendable 5G smartphone spectrum. After all, it depends who the phone's for. Most of us have friends or family who wouldn't know their UFS from their NFC or their periscope optics from their screen refresh rate. At one extreme, we have users who just don't care about the tech as long as the phone's about the right size and colour, not too fragile, and can run their favourite social media apps and games. At the other extreme, there's us, geeks, especially imaging geeks, connoisseurs in fact. We might well care about getting more RAM for better multitasking, more genuine optical zoom in the camera, Qi charging in your car and smart office, and hey, yes, your eyes might be good enough to take advantage of higher resolution and refresh rate. And mine aren't. The Android phone world, in fact, runs down to well under £100 and up to well over £2,000. But I'm going to pick these two devices because they represent the bare minimum I'm happy to recommend and indeed use if I had to, and the maximum I'm prepared for anyone sensible to spend. This also highlights the usual massive law of diminishing returns with smartphone expenditure. Spend, in this case, £179, you get an excellent smartphone with everything one might ever want. Spend more, a lot more, and you get a few aspects, screen, camera, better, but also a few features, 3.5mm jack, micro SD, both here, they get lost in the more expensive hardware. As apparently manufacturers don't think that flagship users want these features. I completely disagree. But there we go, what do I know? The S21 Ultra is almost 30 grams heavier than the Redmi, and you can feel it, helped by being metal framed and not plastic, though obviously every single S21 owner will have their phone in a TPU case, so it's really just about the weight. In fact, the Redmi Note 9T's plastic is refreshingly textured and solid. You do not need a case for this phone, despite one ironically coming in the box, along with a 22-watt mains charger, something which Samsung has dropped for all its 2021 models. The S21 Ultra has a full water and dust rating at IP68, while the Redmi Note 9T says it's just water repellent, which means that the innards are nano-coated. At the price, one can't really hope for an official IP rating, plus the argument is that £179, it's cheap enough to just replace, if the worst happens. The S21 Ultra's display is very slightly larger, but in daily use it's more about the typical vibrance and colour of AMOLED versus LCD. Samsung make the best displays in the world, and this is the best of the best. But Xiaomi's 1080p LCD is also, well, very good for casual use, unless you desire to see the infinite blacks of the best AMOLED when watching media. So it depends. I'm a fan of the flagship's always-on display, of course. You've got to love that. And hey, why hasn't my iPhone 12 Pro Max shooting this also got always-on? Apple? Performance is also subjective. For a user centered around social media and casual games, the Redmi's MediaTek Dimensity 800U chipset is demonstrably good enough. Plus, the far cheaper phone still has 5G, of course, for speedy downloads where supported. The S21 Ultra is, as usual, available in two forms, one with Exynos 2100, one with Snapdragon 888, and both are stunningly fast for gaming, though not for the first time. I think flagship phones have way more horsepower than 99% of users need. More relevant to day-to-day performance is the amount of RAM. For Android 10 or 11, a good guide is what the baseline Google Pixel ship with, and that's 6GB for the 4A pair, making the 4GB here in the Redmi Note 9T seem a little light. In practice, there's just the occasional stutter when starting an app and waiting while something else gets booted out of RAM, but you'd have to be a geek to notice. But RAM is relatively expensive, and at under £180 you can excuse a little skimping. Getting into each phone is via fingerprint. A larger than before ultrasonic sensor in the S21 Ultra is still not reliable. That was 2 tries. I get about 50% success rate. and a side capacitive sensor in the Redmi Note 9T, which works instantly and reliably, 100%. Why on earth is Samsung still staying with ultrasonic? I just don't understand. Now, what about media? The Redmi Note 9T here handled every video or stream I threw at it, as obviously did the Samsung. Both have stereo speakers, not always a given from Chinese makers and not at this price. Here's a demo. First of all, the Redmi Note 9T. Bonamassa and John Hyatt. It's stereo, but there's not much bass. There's not that much fidelity. Still, casual use. The components used by the S21 Ultra are larger and they have the more expensive polystyrene ball filling, meaning they can go louder and with more bass without destroying themselves. The S21 speakers are still trumped by those in the iPhone 12 Pro Max shooting this show, plus a handful of gaming phones, but they're still top-notch. The Redmi does get extra points from me for the proper 3.5mm jack though, and one that puts out decent enough output. And when you've lost your Type-C DAC and your Bluetooth headphones are drained, then this will save the day. And talking of legacy features, which might be darned useful, the cheap Redmi Note 9T also has an infrared blaster and an FM radio. Now, imaging is where much of the purchase price goes in modern phones, of course. The Galaxy S21 Ultra is super expensive, and so it must have a super camera system too, right? Well, yes, in theory, the combined hybrid zoom system from ultra-wide to main 108 megapixel camera to 3 times telephoto to 10 times telephoto and beyond works pretty well. The user doesn't have to worry about which zoom lens is being used, since all zoom factors have some degree of computation, upscaling the 10 megapixel lenses to 12 megapixels, so that the user always gets the same output, with as clear as the phone can manage using both glass and processor power. Taking zoomed photos on the S21 Ultra is effectively pulling images from a digital soup, and the output is typically Samsung. Colours are enhanced, edges are enhanced, great for most users, not so great for impressing me, Steve Litchfield, when pixel peeping, but anyone buying a Samsung in 2021 knows what to expect by now. See the sample photos here, including some direct A/B comparisons. The Redmi's quad Bayer 48 megapixel main camera is typical of the breed, offering decent enough results in most light conditions, including at night, but with no real zoom to speak of. And note there's no wide angle shooter here, just a fiddly macro lens with fixed focus, so not a terribly flexible camera in terms of subject. But it's the periscope zoom possibilities that most people will home in on with the S21 Ultra. It's why you're paying so much money, and it works well if there's enough light, as you can see here. Mr. Data, zoom in again. Impressive, even if you really shouldn't go above 15 times if you want a decent photograph. Of course, with way less going on in terms of chipset power, the Xiaomi phone has the edge in battery, given that both of these have a large 5,000 mAh cell inside. This gets the S21 Ultra through a heavy day. It gets the Redmi through 2 days of normal use. Then again, I love the fact that the Samsung has, of course, got 15-watt Qi wireless charging. I depend on it. And reverse charging for accessories. iPhone-esque, in this case negatively, Samsung dropped card expansion for their S21 range. Now, I understand the technical advantages. No penny-pinching user buying a slow micro SD off eBay and then complaining about phone performance, but I'm still worried people will buy the wrong S21 storage option and then regret it later. Whereas on the Redmi, you just buy a big micro SD if needed, and the card doesn't get in the way of having 2 SIMs in the phone, as sometimes happens. But yes, pros and cons either way. The truth of this comparison is I could argue for the Redmi Note 9T at £179 or the S21 Ultra at 6.5 times the price, though I'd need some imaging updates for the latter to make geeks like me, enthusiasts like me, happy. Which, in terms of a conclusion, feels like I'm wimping out, but with different caveats, I really could recommend both. They're just aimed at totally different users, but they do very neatly bookend the 5G smartphones I can vouch for at either end of the price spectrum.